Welcome to Corporate Cafecito, a podcast based on professional development, career growth, and respecting our cultural identity. Welcome back to Corporate Cafecito. Yo soy Nayeli Suarez Gas.
Y yo soy Carlos Butler Vale.
And today, Carlos, do you know the number one reason? Well, I would say the number one reason why people experience burnout and feel health issues and all that?
No, I'm going to let you. I mean, I have ideas, but yeah, I would love to hear your thoughts.
It's stress.
Oh, that makes
stress.
sense.
It's stress. It's that feeling of being overworked or having deadlines or not being able to finish. And then we get into our heads and we start to worry.
Yeah.
And stress has such a negative impact on our health.
Absolutely. I agree 100%. I've been there and many times, and I've had to learn the difference between good stress and bad stress, particularly in a corporate setting, because I'm the type of person that likes to feel pushed, but there's definitely a difference, and hopefully you can help us cover a little bit about that and what we can do to maneuver through some of that.
I remember I started seeing one of my therapists, and I told her, I was like, yeah, I just always feel like you need to have a little bit of pressure in your chest to motivate me. And she's like, that's awful.
Really? It's
and I was
know.
I'm just so used to it.
Yeah.
But I think to me, stress sometimes is such a motivator.
Yeah, it can
be. And so if we learn to move stress from being stressed to being an adrenaline charge to being a motivator, then it could be very healthy for us.
Yeah, and as you're saying that, I think sometimes I have felt stress of what I'm gonna call is a feeling of complacency. So likewise, I think sometimes I have overstressed myself by moving too quickly or pushing too hard. And at the same time, I've also realized that for me, being still for too long is very stressful in a different way. And so uh, it's important to that and to say that stress is defined differently, or what causes a stress, or what causes stress is universal, I think, but what causes stress for some may not necessarily be what causes stress for others. And again, people sort of deal with it a little bit differently. But you brought up a good point as we were talking about this, that no matter what, there are certain things that happen when we feel stress or are in stressful situations. So take us through that.
We start to worry,
Mm-hmm.
right? So when you are stressed, you start to worry.
Mm-hmm.
When you worry, your IQ actually goes down. We get less cognitive.
Okay.
We're less able to think quicker, or and it also it can be very paralyzing, and it has impacts on our heart, on our mental health, on our physical health. When we are stressed and we are feeling like, oh my God, we're in danger, I need to do this, or I'm at capacity, etc., our brain will release cortisol, which is meant to protect you. Your immune system weakens.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And then we're more susceptible to get sick, right? Have you ever been up against a deadline and now you're also sick and you're still on that deadline? It's because your body's like, oh my God, everything's out of control. And so I think a lot of times when we compound that, and if you're in a stressful situation for too long, it could have a big detriment on your health.
Yeah.
But this is not medical advice, and I do want to clarify that.
That is a good point. But I think the stuff that you're talking about, thankfully, there's a lot of really great research out there that shows, whether it's something like psychological safety, which is obviously, to me, has been a very important topic, because that can
Explain
either... Well, yeah, so the psychological safety element of it, and I'm going to talk about it really in the terms of more corporate, I would say, or, in the workplace, but it's your ability to feel safe to either bring up something, speak out about something, share a need or a worry, concern, but it's how that is received and how that is and what is done with that
Mm-hmm.
can either create a sense of safety that starts with the mind and to your point really has can result in some significant physiological impacts, um, or not, right? And so you either feel psychologically safe or you don't feel necessarily psychologically safe.
Yeah.
But when you think about this, I think about the moments where I have felt stress and knowing that I'm either in a psychologically safe workplace or not really kind of changes it. That's where things really diverge, I think, for me, because when you're in a psychologically safe space, you feel you have support and you feel you have a network and you feel like you can get things back under control versus not, and that's totally different. And when you don't feel psychologically safe, you are not in the moment.
Yeah.
And so I'm talking now about someone who may be sitting at a desk or at a cubicle, but we're not even going to mention the fact that this also has implications when it comes to workplace safety and all of these other things. So take us back a little bit. So you started talking about the
Well, actually,
physiological.
I think that before we do that,
Yeah.
as you're saying this, I want to talk about entrepreneurs,
Okay.
right? Because we don't have this psychological safety because we are the ones creating it,
Yeah.
or we are leading a team, or we're creating the environment, or we have this team that we need to create the safe space for or
Absolutely.
to reward that. And I think as leaders, it's our responsibility to not only create that space, but also identify what that space looks like what you can share, what you can't share. Like oftentimes I tell people, like, this is what we are going to talk about. Here are the things we're not going to talk about
Yeah.
because I don't want to derail the conversation, but I know that they are topics that are on people's minds.
Absolutely.
As an entrepreneur, sometimes you need that. I told you I go to like a networking group and we have coffee once a week because I need coworkers and I need to create that space where I can go and talk about my stress and talk about, the behaviors and what I'm feeling, and have it be received by other solopreneurs who are like, "Oh yeah," or "I tried that," or "I did this."
Mm-hmm.
Um so I think it's important, like in the corporate setting, we know what it means. In the entrepreneurial setting, what that psychological safe place may be. It may be a friend or a group, a networking group, or maybe a therapist, or it
Yeah.
may be like a place where you could just go and just like, here, help me carry this,
Yeah.
or help me go through these ideas, or be my sounding board.
Yeah. And all of the above too.
Yeah.
That I think that's really important because one of the things that you learn in that process is that those needs may shift
Hmm.
potentially, and those people, depending on where they are,
Yeah.
may be able to provide that for you in the moment, may not necessarily be able to. And so when you have really a full kind of toolkit of places where you can go to be able to create to receive that sense of psychological safety for yourself, that makes it, I think, even better. And it's always great because each one of those groups may have different perspectives,
Right.
and it's just such a great way to be able to gain perspective along the way.
And as a leader, I would say how we create those spaces is really important. There's
Mm-hmm.
nothing worse than having that boss who's like, I value new ideas and different thinking. And then they hear all the ideas and they're like, no, no, no,
Right.
no, no. Like, okay, well, guess what's going to happen? You're not going to bring those ideas. And then if you're now like, if you reject a lot of what your team is doing, your team is going to feel stressed
Yeah.
and your team is going to start self censoring.
Yeah.
And when they start self-censoring, then they can't be true to themselves at work. And when they have to be this person that puts on this, armor or whatever to go into work, then they're going to be more stressed.
Yeah.
And then
You're
you're
not
not
getting the
getting,
best. Yeah,
yeah.
you're not getting the best out of your
Did
people.
you know, I want to say it was like, we've talked about this before, but I want to say like stress accounts for like 11 million sick days a year. Don't quote me on that number. I just remembered it was a
A lot.
lot. It
Yeah.
was millions.
Yeah. And with the advent of things like mental health days, and
Mm-hmm.
again, that's not at every organization. And if you are the entrepreneur, if you're the solopreneur, it can be difficult to give yourself a mental health
Yeah.
day, because people are depending on you, to show up and pay the bills and make sure you're sending the checks. And so there's a whole nother, element of that, but it may not necessarily be. I remember before, and I'm sure you do too, before we even started talking about things like a mental health day, which, again, generationally, I love that, as Gen Z continues to go into the workplace, they feel more apt to be able to say, I need, I need that separation, because I feel like I'm not giving my best because I'm not at my best. That is a big shift.
It is a
Even for
big
me as a
shift.
millennial, I know a lot of the folks that I
Well,
work with that are
millennials did a
Xers.
lot of good.
Yeah,
What do you
yeah. I
remember?
think we kind of start like, that some of that started, I think, a little bit, but there still felt a lot of
Millennials
pressure.
gave us work from home.
Yeah,
Millennials were like, "Hey, can I have a day where I'm in my
that's
pajamas?"
true. And Gen Z
So,
are they're perfecting it, I think, a
yeah.
little bit, which is good.
Well, and what's interesting is I want to like I should never throw around stats, but like 16% of the jobs are fully remote,
Yeah.
but they get like a disproportionate share of resumes
Wow.
because a lot of people want to work remote,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
it's less stress on them. They don't have to commute, right? Commuting is stressful.
It is.
Uh, Wardrobe choices, like all the
Absolutely.
decisions you have to make before you even get into the workplace,
Yeah,
cause stress.
absolutely.
And so now we're at work, and it's going to be interesting. Amazon announced that they're going to go back 100% full
Mm-hmm.
time, 5 days in the office, and they're going to be a good case study to see
Yeah,
what happens.
I agree. We've talked about the physiological sort of
Mhm.
effects of stress. I will also say that, and again, I will bring this back to being in the workplace. It's important to learn to manage your stress because I'm gonna try to figure out how to say this in the nicest way possible. It's it's hard to work with that person who's always running around in stress, and it feels sometimes like they can be chaotic. There's a certain like chaotic
Yeah,
energy
stressful is
that people
contagious.
can
Stress is
sort of bring. And
contagious.
so I I have tried to always sort of guard myself from those circumstances, those situations, because you're right, stress is contagious. And I think that, at the same time, we do want people to feel psychologically safe, to be able to say, I'm not in a good place, but what do we do with that, right?
Right.
Let's name it, let's figure out how to do it, and then let's figure out what it is, and then let's figure out what to do with it. But it is difficult for me personally to work with people that I think are always sort of in this heightened sense of, heightened place of stress. And that could be a lot of things could be leading to that, but you have to at least engage in a conversation,
Hmm.
because at the end of the day, your your physiological the
Yeah.
physiological things that are happening to you from your stress will probably start to kind of affect me as well. So I just, as we were having this conversation, I think about the flip side of that. So it's not just about self-managing, it's also about recognizing, particularly, and it's, again, I'm bringing it to a workplace environment. But what would you say? I mean, if you are an entrepreneur, you've had employees too.
Yeah.
How has that affected you when you've seen people that always sort of feel like they're in this heightened sense of a state of stress, and they don't necessarily really know how to manage it?
So it's funny because I remember my friend's brother worked for me, and he told her, he's like, and everything was going wrong, and we were all like talking to her and complaining because this and this hadn't happened, and blah, blah, blah. He goes, and she just sat in the middle and like a music composer and was like calming everybody and was like, okay, this is what we're gonna do, blah blah blah. And my friend told her, like, yeah, that's what she does. She's calming chaos. Like, that's
Mm,
her leadership style. She is amazing at that. And I am like, that's my gift. Like, I when I look at stressful situations, I'm like, okay, like, what do I need to just, what do we need to do? What
mm-hmm,
can be done? Can we do this? Great, let's do that. Can we try this? Great, let's try that. And so I think as a leader and when you manage people, it is your job to bring the calm and to explain, like, I remember one of my bosses, he would always, like, when I would freak out, because I wasn't always calm in chaos. But he would say, like, okay, we have two choices. Like, we could stay the course and hope it changes, or we can try something different. And I always loved that, because I was like, and sometimes, you know what? We needed to stay the course because we were riding out a wave. And I'm like, no, we shouldn't change directions. This is still the right path. We just need to let it go. And then other times I'd be like, no, you're right. We need to change directions. And so I take that with me for everything. And I'm like, when I'm in a stressful situation, I have two choices. I could stay the course or try something different.
So you just made me think about modeling. And I will say, I think for me, this is a little challenging. Yes, but specifically modeling behaviors, right? I always have a challenge with this because I do think that there's something beautiful about what you just said, which is to model to others that there are different ways potentially. First of all, that people handle and manage stress differently, but that it is also possible to maybe learn to manage that. But it's always, I think, I'm not going to say it easier, but it certainly, I think, is helpful when you have people that can model that. At the same time, if you really want to create, I think, a psychologically safe space, you also have to be able to model to people that you can be. Again, I say this, I have a hard time with this because there is also benefit to being able to show people that you can also be stressed, that and that this is the way to sort of deal with that. What say you about that role modeling, for example? Because I'm sure you have probably multiple angles on that.
So one was that, right? Stay the course or try something different. I would say the other thing is, we talk about authenticity, and I have, and even thinking about it gets me choked up a little bit, but I cry with my teams, right? I tell them, hey, you know what, this is really effed up. I also don't think this is how it should be. I agree with you. I can't change it. Okay. Right? We're beholden to a contract, or we're beholden to this, or etc. But I don't shy away and I don't sugarcoat it. Like, it is rough, right? These things did happen. Yeah. I lost an employee. And when that happened, right, I was super stressed. He did not pass on the job, but like, I got the news and then I had to tell my team. And so I think that if you just show, like, your raw emotions, it can't be questioned, right? We're all going to be stressed, but you're not going through it alone. And I think knowing that you're not going through something alone and that your leader's there with you, like taking the punches, is a very different stress than a leader who says, like, just do it or get through it or give me the numbers or do this. I think if you're in it, it's a different stress. It's a shared stress, and then it's also like a team building stress.
And I think that's a lesson that it can be applied to and thank you, by the way, for the vulnerability. I think that's a lesson that can be applied to both people who are entrepreneurs and folks who are also in a people leadership position. Because, the reality is, talking about stress, I mean, there have been times where I felt like I needed to shield my team from just the day to day, elements of it, and I was taking on all of that stress. And when all of a sudden things hit the fan, let's say for example, they would be like, "Well, wait a minute. I thought everything was good." And I realized that I maybe wasn't preparing them. I wasn't doing my best as a leader to prepare them for those moments. I was painting probably too rosy of a picture. And I thought that by showing them that I was dealing with my emotions and always having that sense of composure, I didn't realize that the message that I was sending was that everything was fantastic. And when I finally hit those moments, whether it would be with a boss or whatever, or another leader or a function or whatever it might be, then it was I think it ended up being more stressful for them because then they started to question like, are you okay?
Yeah.
And
If you're
like,
not okay, I'm not okay.
right,
Yeah.
exactly. And like, do I now need to start worrying? And so that was, I think, an important lesson for me. I think there's still important boundaries. We talked about this, right? There are still important boundaries that we should create for ourselves and, maybe for our teams. But I do think that element of role modeling is so powerful because people can't be what they can't see, and I think it's important for folks to
Yeah.
understand that it isn't always rosy, it isn't always great, and when you are able to demonstrate a sense of vulnerability, whether it's asking for help or just being honest, and I'm not saying brutally honest, but being honest,
Mhm.
um, that that I think helps set people up for success when it's finally their turn to
To
be in a
be.
position of leadership.
Well, when we are in stressful times, we remember who we're stressed with.
Mm.
And it's a beautiful thing.
Who's in the bunker? But
Yeah.
yeah,
Well,
who's in the
actually,
yeah
boot camp.
yeah
Boot camp is meant to be stressful. Boot camp is meant to exert like physical and mental,
sure,
like strain and
push you to the
stress.
limits. Yeah,
Yeah. And the reason why it's that way is because if you do that, if you are in this stressful situation and you remember who you're next to, you're going to take a bullet for that person. Strong bonds are made. Like
yeah,
we're going into battle and we're all going through boot camp together. And these are my people now.
yeah,
When I went through I remember one time I slept at work because we were doing this big project and we were like, it was just like one person would finish the presentation and then would send it to our leadership team and then they would take like 2-3 hours to review it,
yeah,
during which we would go grab dinner and then they would kick it back to
yeah,
us. And I loved that team. It was awful, but my SVP was there. It was the SVP, the VP, the director, the managers, and then
so you
and
felt
then us.
like you were all in it together.
Yeah, we weren't alone.
Yeah,
And so, it'd be very different if someone like handed off the deck and said, like, send it to me by 10 p.m. Bye, I'm going out or I'm going home. Like we were all there.
yeah,
And so I think a shared stress can be a very good team building or
hmm
bonding
yeah,
or
absolutely,
experience. Um, However, I don't think that should be the norm.
right,
I feel like, managing stress is really important. And I think there's times when we, also as a culture, right? And I will say Latinas, because it's my personal experience, like we take on so much, right? And then we'll take on a lot of work at work. And then all of a sudden we get a call, and then our kid is sick, and then our
yeah,
parents need us. And, we have all these other things. And so, I think sometimes to limit stress, we have to make sure we understand our capacity.
uh, yeah. That and we could. I feel like that's a whole other podcast
Yeah.
episode because I do think that taking that inventory of what you can do well,
Mhm.
what you shouldn't be doing. I mean,
Yeah.
there's a whole thing there, and it's not just you've mentioned obviously both the personal and the professional, but I do think that there is something there that can be really critical to helping to manage that stress.
Yeah.
And so again, hopefully something cool. Maybe we can invite someone in to help
Yeah.
us,
That'd be
really think
awesome.
about, how to sort of work through that. And we talked about the cultural stuff. I think that's so key. It's so important. And hopefully, for again, our audience who are either, who identify or folks who support Hispanic, Latin people, there's just some really great nuggets there
Hmm.
about both how we take on things, how we handle stress, how we don't handle stress, gender norms, right? I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
there's a whole bag there of things that
Birth
we could talk
order.
about. Oh, yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. And so, listen, the stress is a natural thing. It
Mhm.
is just part of the 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 experience,
It is.
workplace or otherwise. Anything else that you want us
You
to
know,
walk
I
away with?
um I think sometimes we have stress in times of growth, so don't shy away from it. Our body will naturally throw us into stress when we're uncomfortable. So if you are trying something new, like understand that the stress is temporary, and that it can go away. Two, the best way to reset yourself is a deep breath. And did you know that, like, when they are training monks, the first thing they train them is on how to breathe properly. Because when you are scared, when you are nervous, when you are stressed, when you are happy, when you are excited, what's the first thing that changes?
Is your breath.
Your breath. So if you can control your breath, you can control a lot of your emotions and how your body physically reacts to it. So I think that, breathing is beautiful. I would say, talk to your friends or have that stress release. I know that I have one friend, and I know I can show up at her house no matter what time and have a glass of wine, and then I'm like, okay, cool, bye. Like, I just needed a quick reset. Comfort foods, or making time to like sit on the couch and watch TV. Like, find your stress releasers, and then don't feel guilty about using them.
Yeah, I think for me, I will just say exercise is something that I use to manage stress. It in two ways. It's physical exertion for me, so that makes me tired, and sometimes because when I'm stressful, it's hard for me to sleep. But also, if I'm, say, doing a class, it's for that 1 hour. I have to focus on what someone is saying to me, so I
You
really
can't
don't
think
have the
about anything
capacity
else.
about
Yeah,
thinking about anything
that's
else. And
smart.
so it just gives me, even, let's say, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour of a break from whatever it is that I'm doing. And sometimes that alone can be really great.
Yeah.
And I know this is going to sound probably a little crazy, but showers are really good for me. Like, they're just a great time for me to kind of like sit there. Sometimes I stew, sometimes I don't, but for the most part, it feels like a cleansing.
Yeah.
And so I think you're right. Whatever it is that you do, figure out what some of those stress relievers are. Also, surround yourself by people who will tell you when you're being a bit of a mess,
Yeah.
because I think that's important,
Yes.
right? And
Yes.
because sometimes it's great to have a perspective from others. Maybe you don't realize that you are stressed, that you're running around stressed out, and you're stressing everybody else out too. So again, really important. Just a lesson there. Surround yourself with great people everywhere you may be.
Yes.
That can help take you through that journey.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you so much. Relax, try to manage your stress, and know that we're here for you. So, here, cheers to another cafecito, and aquí los esperamos la próxima vez.
Hasta pronto.